Hi everybody and welcome in. So for today's video, we're going to be going over CPUs, central processing units. I am not taking a deep dive into the physics on how a CPU works with the transistors and logic gates. Over my course of the studies with the Coursera IT Support Fundamentals course, and then the CompTIA A+, and right now in college we are working on the CompTIA Network Plus. Nothing's taken any deep dives into how CPUs actually work. I think just having a conceptual understanding of what they do is good enough, and we'll move on from there. So I'm going to be using some analogies today to make it a little bit easier to understand. So if you're in the military, thank you for your service, or if you're familiar with a store or a restaurant and how those work, you'll kind of see how the hierarchical system works. And I think this course that I have laid out will make it just a little bit easier to understand. So what does a CPU look like? Let's take a look at my desktop. Give me just a second. So this right here is an Intel CPU. You can see how that kind of looks. We got like a protective shielding over the top right there. And we can kind of see the bottom side of our CPU chip. Right here we have a bunch of copper connectors that connect to our motherboard. So yeah, this is where information is sent in and then it comes out of our CPU. And now you can kind of see how a CPU is inlaid into our motherboard. It's kind of locked down in with these brackets right here. And then around the outside, you can see our voltage regulation units. Those are in charge of making sure we get a steady supply of power into our CPU. And then lastly, let's end this with a little image of my computer. This is mine that I ordered from Best Buy, I think it was, like 3 years ago. So let's quickly walk over some of the components that we have of my computer. And we'll talk about these components in other videos, but real quick, we have the GPU, graphics processing unit. That is the graphics processing unit. We have our cooling fans all around the outside. So on this cooling fan, we have a radiator on it, the inside of it, with some fluid. Fluid goes down and up into this kitty cat covered thing. What that is my cooling unit. That sits on top of my CPU. So CPUs get a lot of electricity going in and out, which causes them to heat up a lot. And you don't want heat for those. You want them to stay nice and cool so that way we have a steady flow of data going in and out. So when things heat up, we start to have some problems there. You can kind of see the voltage regulation units on the outside here. Once again, that's for that steady flow of electricity going in. And then somewhere hidden behind here is my hard drive, which is an SSD. And then behind this black cover would be my power supply. Up here, the glowing things, that's my RAM. My RAM is right there, okay? And you can see where my power supply right here connects into the motherboard, giving electricity to all of the components here that we can see. All right, but the thing we are going to be covering today, once again, is the CPU, which is located behind the kitty cat cooling unit. All right, so... And then just for funsies, I have Task Manager pulled up. We can see my CPU's information here. We got my CPU's base speed, 3.4 gigahertz. We don't need to focus on that. And then these caches, that's something that we're going to kind of talk about today. Not in super detail, but that's just the information, the data that's stored on my CPU. Okay? So we're not going to be going over any crazy stuff today, like getting into like what gigahertz are. That's going to be a different video after I get a little bit more knowledge on that myself. That way we can do a deeper dive into those particular physics. Okay. So let's get into it. One thing I want to touch base on real quick, something that's made life really great for me, is this device right here. This is my Remarkable Paper Pro 2, and it's immensely helped out with college work. It really has. It's a tablet that feels just like writing on paper. Like I can go in here and write Just like paper, you can choose different colors, different types of pens. You can erase just like you would a regular piece of paper. Let's go ahead and do a better erase on that. And then go back to black. But it's fantastic. I can sort and organize by different folders. I'm not sponsored. Would love to be because I have my eye on that Paper Pro Move. So maybe one day I'll get that. But it's helped out a lot because I'm old school. So like this was trigonometry. I'm sorry, no, this was pre-calculus. The other book over there is trigonometry. And this is just from like 2 weeks of working on stuff. I got legal pads and papers all over the place, and you can see how that would be a little bit hard to keep organized, but the Paper Pro thing is fantastic. Like, and it syncs across my devices really easily. Like it's on my phone and it's on my computer. Does not cost a monthly membership unless you want like additional templates and stuff like that. And it can store like your textbooks as well, which is fantastic. And I can write and highlight stuff in my textbooks. It just makes my life a lot easier. So I also found out I can screen share. So that's why we'll be using that today as well. So let's get over to it. 1 second. All right. And desktop capture. So here's my screen for my Remarkable Paper Pro. So we're going to be using an analogy today. And like I said, for our military people or people who are familiar with working in a restaurant, our CPU is our central processing unit. All right, our central processing unit. And we can think of a CPU as our commanding officer or our general manager. So commanding officers and general managers have 3 primary things that they do. They fetch data, they decode data, and then they execute data or execute programs. All right. So we can think of this in terms of a commanding officer or GM in the sense of they collect information, they make a decision, and then they give orders, right? Well, that's almost exactly how our CPU works. It collects data, it decodes it, it does calculations on it, and then it executes commands after that. It does stuff with the data. And what it does with the data could be like putting it in a register, so on and so forth, so that way our programs can operate. But we're just going to go over the concepts of like what it does. And the big 3 things to remember with a CPU is it fetches data, it decodes data, and it executes commands. All right. So our commanding officer or our general manager, they don't work alone, right? We have our second in command, our 2IC. Our 2IC is going to be our executive officer or our shift supervisors. And for our analogy, that's going to be our RAM. All right, I showed you our RAM sticks today. RAM again stands for Random Access. Oh, too many S's. Memory. All right, so we have our RAM. And then we have our senior enlisted. And then our team leads. So I'm not making a distinction between senior enlisted, team leads, or XO and shift supervisors. So it's the same thing, same people. I'm just trying to go with 2 analogies so everybody understands it the same way. So the thing with senior enlisted and the thing with team leads is they talk to the crew all the time, right? We can think of our crew as data, all right, on our hard drive. So the senior enlisted and the team leads, we can think of it as our hard drive. And right inside of our hard drive is all of the data, all the crew members. Our senior enlisted and our team leads are very knowledgeable on all of the gossip, how all the crew members are working, team morale, all that good stuff. That's what our senior enlisted and our team leads do. They are our hard drive. Well, the thing is, the hard drive is very slow at processing data relative to everything else, right? It takes a while for our senior enlisted and our team leads to go around and talk to everybody to collect all the information we need. So it's really slow. So we need something a little bit faster in order for our CO and our GM to come up with a decision. And that's where our RAM comes in. Our RAM collects all of the data from our senior enlisted, from our team leads. It collects all the data from our hard drive. And as soon as our CPU, our CO, or our GM need that information, they immediately present it. The CO and the GM hold on to that information, they think about it, and then they give their orders after that. And it's very quick. One thing to keep in mind about our RAM and our CPU is they don't have very good long-term memory. As soon as they're done with the task, they forget everything associated with it. But our senior enlisted and our team leads, they remember everything. They go home grumpy at the end of the day. All right, so analogy aside, we've added the analogy, so let's put the analogy aside and talk about what's happening with the computer. So we have our hard drive. Let's mark that in red. We have our hard drive. We have our RAM. And we have our CPU. Hard drive is able to store lots of data. Lots of data. Lots of data. Long-term memory. So our hard drive has a lot of data on it. Like you should know about your computer or your phone storage. Like how much storage is on your phone? You're talking like a terabyte, right? Same thing with a computer, like a terabyte. And we'll go over like the different measurements of computer data in a later video. But a terabyte is a lot of data. All right. And so you have a big collection of data in this huge hard drive. It's super big and it takes a while to process. Our RAM collects that data. And in the process of collecting that data, that time it takes to collect that data, that's called buffering. Okay? That's something to keep in mind. So when you go to load a video game, you know how you double click on it and it takes a while before you go to that welcome screen? And then you know how when I'm playing Fallout and I click start game, it takes a while before the map renders, and I load into the game. That's called buffering. Buffering is the time it takes to pull data from the hard drive into the RAM. And so when our computer needs to process that information from the RAM, it's handed the information really quickly. It does calculations and then it executes commands based on that. GPUs kind of work in the same way. Graphics processing units kind of work in the same way, just on a lot larger of a scale. Okay. So once again, just going back over it, we have a giant storage of data. We buffer into the RAM. It takes a little bit of time to load. And then as soon as our CPU needs the data, it grabs it from the RAM, processes it, and executes the command based on that. And then other things happen. All right, let's get back over. I think that's it. I think that's where we're going to end the video today. I hope this was useful to you. If you like the video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Helps us out a little bit. We also have a Patreon that we're trying to work on and a Discord, which I'm trying to figure that out as we go. So I hope you all have a great day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.